Great. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, so thanks for Rune for inviting me and for the nice introduction, and for Parsons for having me. Yeah, it's an honor and pleasure to be here at the school. I also teach, and I saw many of my former students, which is really nice to see. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that I just noticed that one of the I is not really sitting on the same baseline, but it's kind of meant to be that way. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I wanted to, when Ivan invited me, he asked me what my title should be, and they placed the independent as a placeholder, which I thought was appropriate, and I really liked it, and kind of start the talk, yeah, from there. So yeah, just really quick overview of type of work I do, and I would say I mostly focus on print-based work, and sometimes website, but mostly books, catalogs at various scopes, sometimes for major museums and galleries, sometimes for independent artists, individual artists, or galleries for making invites or small booklets, or it could be editorial projects, and so on. Yeah. And yeah, some projects are quick, and sometimes invitations, it's small objects, but takes a lot of time, kind of thinking about physicality and materiality. Yeah, so just a quick overview of sort of different projects, kind of for you to kind of give you a sense of the work I do. And little background and education, so kind of explain how I ended up in New York. So originally I was born and I grew up in Seoul mostly, and this is a town I was living before I left to the Netherlands, but as you can see, it's kind of urban space, and this is apartment complex that was built for 1988 Seoul Olympics for the athletes. And then when I moved to the Netherlands, when I was 18, my family moved there and I followed. And it was quite a big contrast. In Seoul, it's a big city, and I'm quite used to things and places being open to 24/7. And in the Netherlands, it was quite extreme. They're different, and the sign here says it's for kind of one of the most common supermarkets in the Netherlands called Albertijn, and they're having huge signs saying now they're open on Sundays from 4 to 8, because they used to not open for weekends altogether. So this is like a big deal. And then, yeah, I went on to study at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague, which is called KBK. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the education system, because I find it very different and maybe interesting to talk about it, because this is also an art school. And so I think unlike most schools in US, when you apply for school, you already had to declare your major. And so applying there, I already kind of had decided I wanted to study graphic design. And my foundation program was already kind of laid out for me. So there was no registering, classes that I'm interested. It was kind of given to me in a roster from Monday to Friday, 9 to 4. And that was that. And So in the foundation year, I had calligraphy, typography 1, graphic design 1, art history, drawing, painting, and photography. And it was very structured and you could say technical and kind of old school way of learning typography. And also, not only the structure, but grading system was also something very different than here. I'm not sure if this is how they do it still. This is a long time ago. But so this is sort of the form you get when you, at your end of year evaluation. And you can see here there are two grading systems, basically. And numerical grade here, which is 7, which is a pretty good grade. But it stands for, I think, overall how happy they are with you as a student, or how good of a student you are for this class. Like, you know, it could be your attendance or your attitude or your homework and so on. And then there are letters here. You see O, T, V. And O stands for onvoldoende, which translates to insufficient. And T, I think, is for te twijfelt, which is for doubt. And V is voldoende, which means sufficient. So these 3 letters sometimes have more importance than the numbers, because if you have insufficient, it means you will not pass. And so these letters kind of indicate the maturity and readiness for students to move on to the next stage. So you could be a pretty good student, but somehow your teachers can come together and tell you, I think you'll be better off if you did this one more time, or if you repeat this year, or give you conditions if they had some doubts. It was really, I had a great time, 4 years of studying graphic design there. And after graduation, I had opportunity to work at the in-house design studio for the school. It was like a kind of a fellowship program where you could work. They hire every year 2 graduating students to do basically all communication designs for the school. So you could only work there for 1 year, and after 1 year you leave and they hire new 2 graduating students. So it was a really fun place to kind of work with another, friend of yours who graduated together, and not having any boss, and you're really winging it the whole year and making lots of mistakes and learning through doing, and from printing, working with the printer and so on. And this is also when I kind of really started to thinking about the next steps, and also started attending more lectures, and found out about other designers like Mev Sanderson, Experimental Jet Set, Metahaven, and Karl Martens, and this school called Werkplatz Typography, which translates to typography workshop. And I was really fascinated about all these designers, how they could manifest themselves as an independent studios in the world of graphic design, and decided to go there, and was fortunate to be accepted. And curriculum at Werkplatz was completely different again than KBK, because it was a graduate program, so it's more research-based. But still, even the spirit of school was very different. It was more experimental, and there was zero structure. So students kind of come up with either your own research projects, or you could bring your even client project. But it's kind of in between school and practice, like a collective studio that kind of encourages independent practices, how you can kind of, and what it looks like. And so there, it kind of, it was, there were some struggles too, you know, because a lot of time kind of thinking about what I want to do and finding my interest, but spending 2 years there kind of made me get a more concrete sense of my interest in publications and publishing in different ways. And so, yeah, right now this is my studio, actually just from today. So I live and work in Queens with my partner, Burton Hasebe, who's a type designer, and I collaborate a lot with him, and he was also teaching at Parsons. So again, yeah, so I'm an independent graphic designer running my own studio for the most part. And, but, you know, saying that I'm independent, actually, it can be, it's quite far from the truth. And that you are dependent on a lot of things, you know, you definitely collaborate a lot with people you work with, the editors, either artists or printer, and or it could be budget, or, you know, a lot of things that kind of influence on the project or your studio practice. And like anything, there are pros and cons of being independent. In pros, you're your own boss, and you know, you're efficient, you can make decisions more quickly, and it's, you're flexible, you know, you have flexible hours, and you can make it a lifelong career. And the cons, you're your own boss. You know, if you have a problem, you have to solve your own problems. You have to seek for your own mentorship. There's no default person to kind of go to when you, you know, to rely on. And efficiency can work in reverse. You know, you're kind of one person doing 10 people's job, and it can be really overbearing. And being flexible means you're working 24/7. And lifelong, you have to kind of, you know, you'll have to work lifelong and no retirement. And yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about maybe 3 projects in depth that are kind of, I think, I thought was interesting, and in some detail. I hope it's not boring. But the first project I wanted to talk about is Constructs, which is architecture. It's a newspaper for Yale School of Architecture. And it was, I think, first designed by Michael Beirut from Pentagram, and then David Reinford had redesigned. And I think he was doing it for a while, and then it was passed on to my friend and former partner, Jeff Ramsey, and then he had passed on to me recently. So it had such a touch of such great talented designers, and I think when I got it, the grid system, everything was already in place and working. But the thing was, each time this is still kind of low budget project and happening in a really fast turn of time. And start to finish, I would say it usually takes like 6 weeks. And the contents always come in batches, I think like 4 batches, because they're, you know, they're collecting all the materials, and when they have enough, they send it to me at 1 batch, and then while I'm working on it, they collect like 2nd batch and so on. So the process is more like this. So as soon as I get the first batch, in a week of time, it's about like 10 pages or so, and I lay it out and then send it over at the end of the week. And when the layout is approved, it's sent to the proofreader. And the first round of proofreader reading is really mainly for like copy edits and also sometimes they want to replace certain images, and it deals a lot more about the content. So, so when you get it back, actually it's a lot of edits, and you may have to kind of make all of a sudden fit the whole new column of text, or all of a sudden you have too much space and you have to figure something else out. So you have to kind of make a revision, and then of the edited layout, and then and all the batches are proofread and edited and revised, it's ready for kind of second and final proofread, but it never ends at second. And then you really go into details, working on word breakings to more design details. And then it's sent for approval for the dean, and you send it to print, and the printer sends you a print proof, and then you work on correcting images, and then and it's sent off to the press. And somewhere working with Nina Rappaport, who's the editor of Constructs, she kind of brought up the subject of redesigning the constructs, but there's no budget and no time. And because redesign is by itself like whole process, and there's like neither on my side or I think for Nina, it was kind of a big commitment to commit to, and we decided that we can't really do a complete like makeover, but also maybe not necessary, but make small adjustments. And so first off, the quick first step was to take a look at the typeface and see if there was something in the same genre as existing typeface that we could that could work better for the format of the publication. And my partner Burton was working on a grotesque at the time, and I asked him to adjust a couple of things, and the X height of the X height was slightly reduced, and proportions slightly narrower, and because they're always in this narrow columns, and it kind of fit this proportion better, and the text was a bit heavier and the color is darker, which kind of gives a bit, I think, better legibility. And so also kind of setting this in this type size, you know, in the same size, it was also more economic. You know, although, so the left, so the left one here was original Helvetica, and the right one was the revised. And it was also economic for the same size you're using. We could fit more words, which is to our benefit. And this was sort of the comparison in text color. And then this revision in proportion was also quite. You could see better in also uppercase, because also the narrower proportion. When you set it on top on the masthead, it was a lot bigger and more prominent. Yeah. So this was sort of the first adjustments we did, and when I presented this changes, Nina got back to me saying it's very subtle. And it is true. I mean, it's very subtle, and she was right. You know, although I think the text color and legibility in general was improved, the layout and overall kind of look didn't really change. So, but given the time we had, this was, we kind of went on with this little adjustments for this issue in the fall. And over the summer, when we had a little more time, we kind of met and sat together and kind of discussed what we could address the next time. And she mentioned she didn't want a wall of text, which means I think overall they thought it was, it felt like it's too much text, and then they wanted it to be more visual and no like relentless images, and she wanted a clear numbering system for hierarchy, so that a more hierarchy in typography, so there are more headings and also bring Yale architecture back on the cover, because I guess that's how it was originally. So first, we came up with the hierarchy system, and we kind of gave it a number. So when she's giving me copy, she knows how to indicate which has certain hierarchy. So it's efficient when we communicate. And then instead of just having construct and spring the year line, we added Yale architecture back on the cover, and all of a sudden, we had a lot more type to juggle with for the cover. So I felt it was appropriate to change it to title case and reduce the year line a bit smaller. And this was sort of the cover system we came up with. So these three big words, constructs, Yale, and architecture, they have slightly different behaviors. So constructs always fixed on top and never moves. And architecture is also always fixed at the bottom, but it can kind of move side to side. And Yale, and the word Yale would kind of jump around depending on the image or the issue. So these are kind of the mock-ups, the possible scenarios that that could work with this cover system. And Nina was happy with it, and yeah. And now, since the cover typography changed, we also felt it was appropriate to change the heading inside the article. So it was also kind of centered and more, maybe less strict, and more room, or more floating, kind of off the grid, and also remove the top bar that was always there before. And the rest was really, we didn't really come up with a new grid system or a whole new system, but it was really kind of following her cues and working with the content, and really making sure you're reading every article and know what it's about, and following if there are speakers, kind of do a little research, invest your time, and kind of really integrated images a lot more with the text for better reading experience, and also more hierarchy started. There are more typographical hierarchy in the layout as well, which gave more visual feeling. And overall, I think that was I think perhaps still subtle, but if you compare to the last issue and the current, it's a nice kind of evolution, or it's a nice adjustment, I think, since the last one. And if you kind of look inside the document, this is what it looks like with all the typographic, the styles, and the grid system. And for the cover, Nina and I, we both really wanted to use this image by drawing of Annie Albers, but wasn't really working because of the graphic quality of the image, and wasn't somehow doing justice for the image, and also had issue with legibilities. And we tried making perhaps collage, but in the end ended up with just one graphic image and revised cover system. So this is sort of the flipping through of the not redesign, but adjusted layouts. And yeah, I think in the end, yeah, they were really, really happy with it. And I think Dean was very happy with it. And I think in the end, it is probably still super subtle that most people who read this won't even notice there's any single thing changed. But I think, yeah, I hope to, it's kind of ongoing adjustments I hope to make, and kind of looking forward to, we are now starting a new issue, and I quite like this approach to redesign. So instead of like completely redoing, you can kind of improve. Okay. My apologies, this is not the right title. Wait, I'll just move to the next. So next project I wanted to show is catalog for Jennifer Packer, who's an artist and painter for Renaissance Society. And so it was her first monograph at for exhibition, solo exhibition at Renaissance Society at University of Chicago. And I was really excited to work on this project because one day I got an email from curator asking for work, and he said he came across my work and was asking if I would be interested in taking on this project. And I'm mentioning this because this is something that never happens. You know, it's always sort of people you had connection with, or it's word of mouth, and you know, that come, you know, for reach out to you, and never really out of blue, and you know, saying, oh, I like your work. So this was something. Kind of the only time, I don't know, maybe some other people have this all the time, but for me it was a rare opportunity, and they also ended up, they were really easy and fantastic to work with. So Jennifer Packer, she is an African-American female artist, and she makes paintings of her friends, families, and often I think her works are often described as kind of intimate, and there are lots of vulnerability and uncertainties. And next to her kind of portraits of her friends and family, she also has a flower Still Life series, which is actually the funerary bouquet, and her source of material ranges from photographs to imagined scenarios, but always subjects are always people she's close to and something or she reflects on. And this one is called Exercise on Tenderness, and it's a portrait of a policeman or a woman. It's a bit unclear, and and one of the techniques she uses a lot is kind of scraping off the canvas, and also she often talks about taking really long time to finish her painting, and which is kind of important. So there is always the sense of intimacy and kind of in her element in her painting. And once in an interview with Kerry James Marshall, she, I think Kerry James Marshall, he talked about his painting as he wanted to make his aim in his painting is making it kind of unbreakable and invulnerable. And Jennifer Packer, her interest was kind of exact opposite. And so when you're designing a book, first, it kind of comes a format. Think about the physicality of the book and how should it feel, and should it be hardcover, soft, or is it going to be sharp or heavy or light? And sometimes it comes with certain requests also, and in this case they wanted the book to be hardcover. And so I decided the format would be 8.5 inch wide and 12 inch tall. And the next is kind of thinking about the pace of the book and how will you show the content of the book. In this case is her artwork, which are her paintings and documentation of the exhibition. And one thing that stood out to me was the scale in her paintings. Because often when you're just reading online or laying images in InDesign, the concept of scale kind of get lost. But in actuality, her paintings look more like this. So kind of to show that, how do you show that in the book? And to kind of show large image, especially the landscape paintings, naturally you would kind of fit it across the spread to make it as large as you can make it. But to me, somehow putting her painting across the gutter felt a little harsh, to have this kind of physical cut of paper in between. And so I kind of came up with this structure where most of the book, so the signatures of the book are mostly, so the text part, the front matter and the essays are bound the normal way. As you can see, the binding directions towards the spine. But then the spine, the plate section, which is where the images will be the other way. So it's called like a Japanese binding or a French fold. And so in that way, you kind of start an image from one page, and then it will move over. So you may not be able to see an entire image at once, but at least the one painting will still be printed on one sheet of paper instead of being cut. And I thought that was something kind of nice, talking about the bodies and of she paints and of her friends and like loved ones. And you would show the paintings kind of in proportion. And the same would be for the exhibition images. It kind of forces you to get out of each photo and then kind of jump on to the other and have kind of different way of experiencing the exhibition. But then the feedback was that they really liked the idea of this Japanese folds, but it didn't quite work because of the need. It was really important for them to show her painting at one piece without fragmenting them. So yeah, we kind of went back and revised the design, and now we decided to just put images, one image per page, kind of ignore the scale altogether. But then we'll have moments like this where you kind of zoom in extra close to the painting. You're kind of immersed in the painting, but still never across the full spread. And then you think about typography also. And looking at her book, I immediately, this typeface called Latisha, which also Burton had just finished recently then, came to my mind immediately. And this is a revival of Latisha, originally designed by Jan van Krimpen in the 1920s. And I thought really, this typeface was kind of fitting for this project because it was also Jan van Krimpen's first typeface he drew, I think at Enschede Type Foundry. But also in the 1920s, you may think it's a long time ago, but this was a time when people were also designing things like Futura, and there are other movements, and I kind of like this classical kind of aspect in design, or aspect in Latisha, as well as her medium of art, which was painting in the day of today. And there was another interesting component in the book, which was one of the essays by April Freely. And this essay had a particular structure. It kind of, it was more descriptive, and it focused on individual works of like one by one. So about specific painting and about specific moment in the painting, and more as like a reflection. And so for her essays, we thought it would be nice to kind of bring back that extra zoomed in moment back to the essay, and kind of put them next to each other. And for the cover typography, again, I kind of wanted to express that vulnerability in her painting, and kind of broke the word in this way, tender-headed, which was the exhibition title and the book title. But the feedback was it's a little too harsh to break the title in like 3 lines, in 3 pieces. So I went a little back, kind of breaking it only once, so making it 2-line, and tried incorporating her flower series on the cover, and perhaps it could be on like 4 different flowers. But it was first too expensive, and they didn't really think it represents her like entire scope completely. So we went back to maybe being typographical only, using some of the colors in her painting, and then went even more back and make very wide and somber cover, but then have this kind of edging on the sides. But then in the end, they kind of got back to me and saying they think perhaps this painting is very important in her work, and they would like to put that on the cover. And so that's what we finally came to. So this is a final version of the cover, completely. So it's hardcover, kind of with paper around instead of cloth. And this image was printed like full bleed. And the interesting thing is that if you look at the actual size, the book is actually larger than the painting. And so I quite like this aspect of the book. It's kind of really forcing you to look at the painting in a certain way and really, yeah. So I think it's maybe a good example of the way you can work, because sometimes I think I try to do, I think I wanted to kind of do the least in the most deliberate way possible. And there are a lot of back and forth dialogue, and you kind of have to trust each other completely, that each other has, important input for the project, and kind of it can lead to surprising and satisfying results. And last one is, sorry, I think I'm running a little behind, is a website for Mary Reinbold Copeland, who is an old-time friend and collaborator. I work with her on various publications for gallery or her own self-published book. And this was a book about idea of parasite and kind of table of content living on the spine, like elsewhere, like a parasite. And I always loved working with her and have a great relationship, because she always gives me 100% freedom and trust in doing whatever decision I make. And one day she came to me and she liked to redesign her website, which currently looked like that at the time. And then one really, and it was again completely up to me, but then one really feedback, one request she had was, it has to be visual. And she's a writer, and so her work is always text, and so text heavy. So she really didn't want any like typography, or the least typography possible, and lots of visuals. So how do you kind of achieve that? And I started kind of building an image library and reference library of, that sort of either directly referenced in her writing or mentioned, like it could be more vague, and then kind of incorporating images next to some of the keywords juxtaposed next to each other. But then something didn't feel quite right, and she also felt like the colors were a bit too subdued. So we kind of, we decided we'll go more like RGB, very harsh color palette, and maybe all this, it won't be, we'll unify to just one or two typeface, but then still juxtapose title and some words and images. But then after a certain point, it was becoming a little confusing as well. Like, what's the reference and what's her actual work? And although, she never really rejected this direction, it kind of made me think about a lot of things, and revisited some of the materials she initially sent me, which kind of look like this. And I thought, and somehow this experience of reading just text in itself was an interesting visual that we can kind of borrow. And I, without her really rejecting the design, the current design, I kind of redesigned the website to be this way, kind of mimicking this PDF or very standard Google Doc or a Word document format, and she was really happy with it. And then, but then in the end, we stripped it down even more further, and just completely got rid of colors and made it all black and white. And this was also possible because of Brandon Graffitz, who helped me building the website. So this was, I think, another example of really working with lots of trust. And sometimes you have to listen to clients' requests and really trusting that they have important reasons, but then also trust kind of your guts to kind of maybe revisit and saying that it's a right decision for what they wanted, although what they initially requested is exactly opposite of what you end up doing. So yeah, I think that's it.